My name is Scott Nelson, and I've been involved with Bigfoot research for about 11 years now. And it's not something I meant to get into. The first thing I like to tell people is that I'm not a Bigfoot guy. I'm just a language guy that happened to stumble into this study of the and what we feel we've shown demonstrated very well that these creatures are not big, stupid gorilla, ape-like creatures. These are very closely related to us. And the reason we believe that is because we know now that they have language. And if we are going to define Sasquatch by the same standards that we define ourselves, then we have to believe that they are intelligent, sentient, even creatures. Because language is the defining factor in that. So it's something that started out very benignly, and hey, let's go look and see if we can get some evidence on Sasquatches and see if we can gather evidence, more tapes, more vocalizations that have linguistic value. And it's just led into a high strangeness, if you will. For the first 5 years, of course, I've been working most closely with Ron Moorhead over the years. And we began right away being invited to conferences to speak about our study, and 3 or 4 times a year. It happened very quickly. And even though we knew about the weirdness that had happened up at the Sierra camp for decades, we had decided in the beginning not to speak about the strangeness of it. Just because at that time there was a big camp of Bigfoot researchers that didn't want to even hear about. Of course, they didn't even want to hear that Sasquatch had language, let alone that there was some very weird crossovers into whatever you call interdimensionality, or who knows, UFOs, and we're talking high strangeness. So for the first 5 years, me and Ron had an agreement that when we were at conferences, we weren't going to talk about the weirdness. We were just going to talk about Bigfoot and the fact that he had language, which to us was enough, trying to demonstrate that. But after about 5 years ago, it got to the point where we no longer felt we could lie by evasion of it. Evasion of the topic, right? And we just finally decided, look, we don't care now who thinks we're crazy. We're just tired of trying to cover it all, trying to gloss over it all. So that's when we decided that we were going to start, we still, our most important thing that we do when we go to conferences and present our study is that itself, is to present the study and to continue demonstrating that these creatures have language. Because, and quite frankly, that has changed everything about the perception of Sasquatch. When we first started, the most prominent theory was that these were remnant species of Gigantopithecus who had somehow learned to walk on 2 feet. That these were remnant Gigantopithecus that had somehow survived and learned to evade humans, and what evidence was there? Nothing. Well, there was a tooth that they said came from a gigantic ape. Well, we're not disputing that there were gigantic apes over here. Okay, what we're disputing is that what we're dealing with is not a giant ape. One thing, And I asked a very prominent scientist this question once. I said, what evidence is there that Gigantopithecus walked on 2 feet? And he very honestly said, none. All we have is a tooth. And I think maybe a jawbone out there, something like that, right? So we were very early on convinced that we're not talking about a big, dumb gorilla incapable of speech. And by the way, the higher apes, other than us, do not have the apparatus needed to articulate language in the way that the Sierra being articulates language. They have, whatever that being is, it has the same apparatus that we do because it articulates speech in exactly the same way we do, and beyond. Beyond, they make sounds that are beyond our ability. So that's really how we got involved in the presenting the highly strange things. I'm trying to separate the things that can be attributed to a Sasquatch being, okay, from the things that simply cannot be attributed to a Sasquatch being. Okay. And by the way, one thing that we have discovered, and a conclusion that we've come to, is that we don't know what they are. At first, we felt it wasn't our job to prove that they existed because there were so many people out there doing that already, with all of the footprint evidence and the vocal evidence, But we, of course, had the only linguistic evidence. And, so at first, me and Ron decided that our job really was not to prove their existence, but to give a better idea as to the nature of them. So that's what we started out to do. But the longer we did it, and the more expeditions we took up to the original Sierra camp, the more and evidence gathered from other sources, other people that are coming forward and showing that this is way more than we think it is. I've changed the way that I refer to the creatures. At first, I just called them Sasquatch. The first thing I published was the Sasquatch phonetic alphabet, but then I had to revise that because the concept that we were dealing with was changing so quickly. Now I have to do another revision of that because so I first started out just calling them Sasquatch, and then we started calling them Sasquatch being or Sasquatch creature. But now it's come to the point to where we don't know what they are. I am quite certain that they are more than just a big, hairy wild man related to humans that lives in a forest, comes out at night. So I have begun to refer to them as the Sierra being, because I have no evidence, real evidence, that it's the same being that might be in Florida, or might be but because we have evidence from really all over the world, but certainly in North America and all over. But we have no real evidence. Are they exactly the same being as the Dog Man in Ohio? Or the Momo, where I live, Missouri? I have a theory. Of course, I believe that they're the same, but we have no evidence of that. So when we're doing a study that borders on scientific, even though language is an art, it's not a science, but it's bordering on, what we're doing is borderline scientific stuff. I've had to revise my understanding of that, and I have now begun to call them simply the Sierra being. the ones that we have on tape from the Sierra camp. So if I use that term, you'll know what I mean by that. I really mean Sasquatch, but we don't know what they are. Some of the what you might be interested in is some of the weird things that I personally have witnessed, and I can tell you many of the other highly strange things that have happened up there at the Sierra camp and elsewhere that I personally did not experience, but I heard it firsthand from people that have no reason to mislead me. And from multiple people at the same time that experience the same thing. Right? So, personally, something that happened, the first thing that happened to me personally and my son Stephen, Ron, was our very first successful attempt to make it to the Sierra camp. Yeah, I refer to that as our first successful attempt because it was the first time we were actually able to make it to the Sierra camp. The year before was a disaster where Ron was almost killed, and I like to joke that I saved his life, and he'll even give me that credit too. And something prevented us from making it to the Sierra camp. It's the simplest way to say it. So that following year, Stephen came with me, and we finally made it into camp. It was probably about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Of course, we started almost 3 or 4 in the morning, and we hiked all the way in, carrying everything in that we thought we needed. And the second we got to the camp, and we had of course, we were so exhausted, and we'd set our backpacks down and just were sitting, leaning back against a tree or a log, and taking a drink, and we estimated 40 to 50 yards directly west of where we were sitting, we heard a sound that to me, it sounded exactly like, well, to all of us, it sounded exactly like a cowbell, only so loud. And I grew up around cows. I know what cowbells sound like, right? But directly west of our camp, we hear clang, 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 just like that. I'd never heard a cowbell. It sounded like it was purposely rung in that pattern. Clang, clang, clang. And we stopped, looked at each other, and I said, what the hell? What the hell was that? And Ron, who had, by necessity, become a skeptic over the years, he at that point was not willing to, talk about anything. If he did not see a Sasquatch walk up and say, "Good morning, sir," then he was not going to call it a Sasquatch, because he'd been ridiculed for 35 years. So all of us went, "What the hell was that?" And Ron goes, "Oh, that was a cowbell. There must be cows up here." I said, "Ron, that was not a cowbell. There's no cow. There's no cow. Cows cannot make it up to this mountain. What we just endured getting up here. There's no way." He says, "Oh, we saw cows up here a couple times." I said, "Ron, that was not a cowbell." And no sooner did I get that little exchange was over. In other words, seconds after that sound, then directly east of the camp, approximately the same distance, we heard the same exact sound. Clang, clang, clang. Exactly the same, weirdly metallic sound. And I said, Ron, well, that was a cowbell too? That's the fastest cow I ever heard, right? Because it had traveled at least 80 to 100 yards, completely around our camp without making a sound, and then decided to ring its cowbell. So Steve and I look at ourselves and, no, Ron. And then Ron finally had to accept it. No, that was highly strange. So that was one of the first things that I personally experienced up there, which, led into so much of our discussion about, what kind of strange things had happened up at that camp over the many years. And Ron, Ron will tell you all of these stories himself. So this one afternoon, it's a very famous story amongst them that they were sitting there one day with the sun high, middle of the day, 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and they heard this tuning fork sound, as if someone struck a tuning fork, and it just vibrated and emanated over the whole mountain. And they tried to, they talked, where's that coming from? Where's that coming from? They could not tell whether it was coming from the sky or whether it was coming from underground. That's how strong it was. That's how strong the vibration was. Of course, this is something that would not have, in our concept of a Sasquatch being a forest ape, has nothing to do with Sasquatch. That was one of the things that troubled them for a long time. There were many things, but I'll try to remember as many as I can. One of the things that happened to them up there one night was I found to be one of the strangest of all, and that is, the hunters were huddled in their lean-to cabin that they'd built a couple decades before, and they heard vocalizations. They heard more than one creature stomping around. They started to hear all of the gear that was outside of the cabin being picked up and thrown around, and they had big 55-gallon barrels that they would burn stuff in, and other 55-gallon barrels that they packed stuff in to protect them. And they heard these barrels being picked up and smashed against each other, and then being thrown down the side of the hill toward the stream. They heard their stove being smashed, and just a huge ruckus. Of course, a huge ruckus. Of course, they were all, as they say, they all pulled their pistols. They were at any moment waiting for whatever was out there to come crashing through the lean-to and just to kill them. That's really what they expected. And but then the sound dissipated. They had their pistols drawn. They had their guns ready to really defend their lives. But then it stopped. And so the hunters settled down a little bit. I mean, maybe they're gone, but none of them was willing to even look outside. No, thinking that they could, intimidate the creature again or whatever they were. So they stayed in there. They finally, some of them stayed up all night till the sun come up. They weren't going to go out. Some of them went to sleep, but in the morning, when the sun was well up, and they felt secure enough to look out and to walk out, they walked out, and the camp had not been touched. Everything was exactly in its place, where the stove was not crushed. There was not, their gear was not scattered. Everything was exactly where they had. Pots and pans that they the night before had heard being smashed together and thrown. They walk out and everything is absolutely the way it was. So it's not like something had gone in there and wrecked their camp and then came back later in the night and put everything back. It was as if it had never happened. That I found to be, and I heard this from more than just Ron. It was that I found to be one of the strangest things. And of course, that takes us way out of the realm of a Sasquatch. Over the years up there, they had so much activity. There were a couple people, a couple guys that had actually witnessed a Sasquatch. One guy got up early in the morning once and went down to get some water, rinse his face off, whatever, and directly across from this little stream, he looks up and there's what he thought was a young Sasquatch just standing there, sitting on his haunches, looking back at him. And of course, that scared him so much that he would never go back up there again. So there were a lot of people, or a number of people, that had actually witnessed a Sasquatch being up there, including Ron's daughter, Rhonda, had seen one. Walking down, stopped, and they seemed to be able to freeze. Something that we've understand about them now, they're able to stop and so suddenly and freeze and really almost blend in, almost a stealth mode, where they seem to be able to blend into their background, and then they'll just walk off again. And this happened to Rhonda when she was up early by herself once. And of course, that's just trying to understand the nature of Sasquatch. But it really, them having those abilities would take us out of the natural realm of a big, hairy ape. I'll tell you about something that happened that first year, the first year that we tried to get up there, that would take us out of the realm of the natural world. I got Ron down off that mountain, right? And Ron's Rhonda and Ron's granddaughter and Ron's ex-wife were there. They had come up. They had planned to come up to. God, we were so grateful that they did, because we were in bad shape. Ron had several broken ribs and damn near a broken arm. So they had come up just at the right time. Talk about synchronicity. and took care of us. They made us a steak dinner that night. I know I'm getting off track here, but it was just so welcome and wonderful that they had come up. Well, while we were in camp, recovering a little bit before we could even head back down the mountain to Mariposa, where Ron lived, a couple of weird things happened. I mean, a lot of Sasquatch stuff, and I'm going to stay away from oh yeah, we know Sasquatch. Somebody did this, had to be Sasquatch, but it's within the natural realm. I'm trying to tell you about the unnatural things that cannot be explained by a Sasquatch being. We were sitting, we were in camp, and what's called the horse camp. It's down at the bottom. It's in the valley. It's next to the river. And the Sierra camp is clear on the top of the mountain. Right? So we were essentially just down the cliffs from there, but thousands of feet below. And it was a beautiful little camping area. So we would take walks, and Wendy, uh, Ron's granddaughter, took a walk down this trail, down the river, and she wasn't gone long when Rhonda, who was sitting in camp, saw uh, what she saw. It was bright day. It was the morning time, so the sun was already up. She saw very quickly a silhouette of what she thought could be Sasquatch, a huge man. We were in an area where, and on the side of the river where there were no other people. And she saw very quickly running through this little clearing area what she thought looked like a large man. She was a little bit worried because her niece had just walked off down into the direction that way. So Rhonda got up and she walked down that trail looking for, he said, I'm going to go. Me and Ron didn't see it, but Rhonda did. So we didn't go with her. Rhonda walked down that trail looking for her niece, Wendy, and finally found Wendy. And Wendy, when she met Rhonda on the trail, says, "Did you see that wolf?" She says, "No, wolf, what are you talking about?" She says, "No, she says, that giant white wolf." And she said, "No, we have no idea what you're talking about. I saw a silhouette running through the," and I'm paraphrasing a conversation that they had out on the trail. And Rhonda will tell you this exact same story. And so would Wendy. She tells Wendy, "No, I saw this big, giant, man-like thing running through the woods down towards the stream, and I was worried about you because you had just walked down there." And she says, "No, I didn't see anything like that. Nothing like the Sasquatch." She says, "But I saw this a giant white wolf, massive, running down in this spot." And that's what first gave us the idea. Could these things have an unnatural ability to shapeshift? And of course, it wasn't long before, we hear, the more I got into the study, you hear from Native Americans and things like that, that they've always said that these creatures have the ability to shapeshift. Well, that takes us a step beyond, the natural world. That was one of the early things I remember. Several years later, and we had already begun to sense that these were not just benign big forest brothers. We began to sense that it's that you have to be careful and you have to prepare yourself, and and again, how do you prepare yourself against something that could kill you with a hand slap? And but there had already begun an idea of like, you don't want to be out here alone. So one year, about 5 years in, Ron, Stevie, and I had been up on the mountain, had made a couple of expeditions up there already in that summer, and there had been nothing. There had been zero activity. And we were disappointed, of course. And we went home, and after those 2 expeditions, and me and Stevie packed up and drove back to Missouri. But Ron was, I could tell, he was concerned about it. He said, I want to go back up there. I said, "Ron, no. You need to promise me now that you will not try to go up there alone." And he did. He promised me, right? As I remember it. But I'll be damned if, we're not very far out of town when he begins planning to go up there alone. And he did. And as he will tell it now, it was a mistake. And he only intended to go up there for one night, thank God. And he got up there and made it up there somehow alone, with a tent and a sleeping bag, and got the tent set up, and was immediately attacked by mosquitoes. A swarm of mosquitoes that would come from the Everglades. He said it was so overwhelming that it drove him into the tent almost right after he got it set up. And I've heard about this mosquito phenomenon from other researchers, right? But it was so bad, and he had repellent on. Even we always carry that stuff, but the mosquitoes were never that bad up there in the first place. Too high. The elevation is 11,000 feet. So it drove him into the tent. Excuse me. And it was still evening. Sun was still, well, it was probably down, but it was dusk. And when he started hearing activity outside, vocalizations, even what we would call morpheme streams, meaning that it's linguistic in nature, not just a howl or a grunt. And he started hearing that from various places around his camp. And as he tells it, he's in his mind, he says, "Oh man, we're in for a big night tonight." And sure enough, once it got dark, and he says he was scared to death, and he started to talk. He started to talk to him. He says, please don't kill me. He said, "You don't have any reason to scare me. Please don't scare me." Right? And he would just hear more activity. And he said finally he heard one come up and again took one of the 55-gallon barrels and smacked it with something with its hand, so loud it sounded like an explosion to him. Kablam! Which of course scared the hell out of him. And he starts to talk to me and goes, please don't scare me. Please don't scare me. You got nothing to worry about from me. I just up here, I want to try to talk to you, communicate. I want to understand you. But of course he was scared to death. He stayed, he ended up sitting up in his tent all night long. But at one point, after the big explosive slam of that 55-gallon barrel, he's sitting in his tent, and something walks up, gets down its haunches. He didn't see it. He was too scared to look out, of course. And whatever it was made an electronic humming sound. That it sounded almost robotic, but certainly metallic, something that no natural creature could make with his mouth. Ron felt. He said it was impossible for anybody to make this sound, and he almost felt, and it lasted for a long time. I mean, in those situations, it might be a minute, might be 30 seconds, and it seems like it's an eternity. But Ron said, "Scott, it almost felt like I was being scanned in some way." But it certainly wasn't something, flesh and, or at least to our knowledge, a flesh and blood creature could do. And after that, the thing got up, walked away. You can hear them walk, boom, boom, boom. They're so big. Walked away, and it left him alone the rest of the night. But still, he couldn't sleep. So he stayed up the rest of the night. Second the light came, he got up, grabbed his small backpack, left the tent, sleep bag, everything up on the mountain, and just got the heck down off that mountain the second the sun come up. So, and he's been apologizing to me ever since for going up there alone. Right? Mm. I could speak a little bit about the lights. Because these happened, these were not isolated incidents. They happened routinely, if not, you know, eh, not every time we were up there. Because I have never actually seen what he describes as the lights, right? But for decades, the hunters would once in a while see orbs of different sizes. Sometimes they describe them as a size of a basketball, sometimes the size of a softball or in between. And these were orbs that seemed to come down and go through the trees. Now, um, at night you have to understand that the canopy of the trees is so thick that the moon doesn't shine through, the stars don't shine through, so it is essentially, you might as well be 50 feet underground in a cave. It's so black you can't see your hand in front of your face. Now, of course, most of the time, if they're sitting up, they have a little fire going, a little ambient glow, and they would see these orbs come down through uh, and travel through the trees very slowly. It wasn't like boom, and it's suddenly you got a flash of light, and nothing like that. It was as if these orbs were unconcerned with the hunters, or Ron and Al later, and they would skirt the edge of the camp and kind of stay a relatively static distance from the ground, sometimes higher in elevation, sometimes low, and they would travel through the forest, skirting the camp, and would go off through the forest until you couldn't see them anymore. And this happened many, many times. A few years after the incident where Ron was up there by himself, and he had that encounter of being scanned, as he put it, he decided his girlfriend wanted to go up there. So him and his girlfriend went up, Kerry, and having a nice night, relaxing, always being vigilant for any activity that they might gather. And they're sitting by the campfire, and a different kind of light comes down. And they both see it, and this one was about 2 or 3 feet long. It was more of a bar, if you will, or a rod, right, that they described as being about 6, 7 inches in diameter, so pretty thick, and about 2 or 3 feet long. And it came down parallel to the ground, and again, very slowly, and seemingly intentionally traveling slowly and smoothly through the trees just outside of the clearing of the campground. And it did the same thing. It went down following the contour of the ground, and then something was gone. Just disappeared. So that brought other people into that, where Kerry saw it very clearly. It was not a hallucination, they said, because these moments last for a long time. It's not like something shoots through the cap, and is gone. There's something intentionally and intelligently guiding these things. One of the moments that they talk about that was important to them, because they saw it for such a long time. It went down into the valley, and then slowly went up the hills on the opposite side, and eventually they were able to watch it for so long that it went up the side of the mountain, this peak that's kind of a landmark there. There's no trees on top. So we always called it the Bald Peak. And they actually saw this orb go up the side of this mountain and go over the top of the mountain and disappear. Very slowly. Intelligently guided, they felt. This is something I haven't talked to a lot of people about. Okay. Last summer, we went up there to this to the camp, Sierra camp, and now we know probably for the last time because, and we were up there this last summer. We had a lot of forest fires going on, but none of them really near us. But you could see the smoke. And we were up there filming a segment for a movie that they're doing, that Dave Paulides put together. And we'd sit around a campfire and we'd see the smoke from fires miles and miles and miles away. And we speculated, what would we do if the fire hit us up here? The whole mountain would blow up, right? And there's nothing, we would be dead. We were up there for 10 days. Speculating, what would we do? I had my son up there with me. So, my mind is going every day, like, what would we do? There's no way we're getting off this mountain. No way we're going up into them rocks. Because when those rocks get superheated, they explode. So this was a concern for us the whole time. And we got off the mountain. And 2 days later, not attached to any of the other major fires over there. In fact, it was concentrated in a very, very small area. The whole mountain blew up. The Forest Service says it was caused by 2 lightning strikes. Now, how they would know that, I don't know. But where these lightning strikes hit were exactly in the only place that would have caused the fire to roar up on that side of the mountain and engulf the Sierra camp. So the whole trail up there has been destroyed. We have no clue yet. We haven't, we want to try to go back up there and see what's left. But the whole side of that mountain, and only that part, I don't know if you know about those fires that were going on there, but they raged on for miles and miles and miles, hundreds of miles in every direction. But this fire, it was almost as if it was targeted by 2 lightning strikes. And I've got the map. I've got this Forest Service map. I can show you. That's public domain. Boom, 2 lightning strikes happened at the same time, right exactly where the wind would carry that flame up onto the mountain and engulf the Sierra camp. And that's where we're at now. We don't know if the Sierra camp is there anymore. I mean, of course, it's there. It's just probably nothing left of it. So that's something that we have to do, is get up there and see what's left. Bottom line of this whole thing, Ron and I, finally just had to come to a conclusion. And I think Ron put it best. We're talking. I'm saying, Ron, I don't know what to call these things. I don't know where we're going to go. He says, I think the bottom line is that there is way more going on than we can possibly